On January 19th, there was a meeting among the Mandali with Baba present.
Which year?
As to how to celebrate Baba's birthday for this year, 1927. So the discussions got rather hot. A lot of these people thought his coming birthday would be like it was the year previous, which was attended by 50,000 people. And many of them wanted to be ready for that. Baba didn't seem to be particularly interested. He allowed them to go through the thing. But there were a lot of opinions, and a lot of opinions were expressed in a very firm way, to the point where people shouted. Some people lost their temper. Bairamji was so upset that he thought he was going to leave Meherabad. Baba had to speak with him for several hours that night. Speak with him means now Baba is using the board. So the next day again, Baba said he was really disappointed with the behavior and the attitude of the Mandali at the meeting the day previous. And he said he wanted all of the Mandali to think about how and whether they would really want to stay with him, or should he just go away by himself somewhere, do whatever he wanted to do. So again, they were affected by this indication from Baba. He gave them 3 conditions then. And they were asked to decide whether they wanted to take this vow seriously for this next coming phase of life with Baba. The conditions were that they all should stay with him as long as he observed his silence. The second condition was that he may break his silence whenever he likes. Could be tomorrow, next year, 10 years. No limit should be expected on his breaking of the silence. And the third condition was, in the meantime, before he breaks his silence, people staying with him should never ask him for money. This episode with bar soap comes back, and this is an example. And Baba laid down the line again here that nobody should be asking him for money. So the discussion was there with the new school. The Mandali agreed to these 3 terms, and for the confirmation of that, Baba brought the fire urn with sandalwood, and they each of them at that time, the beginning of that second long stay, made their vows, their oaths to Baba with the urn of fire and sandalwood in it. Again, Baba fasted in the Jyoti for some days, in seclusion there, really. Off and on he would come out, but he was making decisions and plans for that new school he wanted to do. At the beginning of February, the boys' day school that was started upon the return to Meherabad was shifted from the village to the old bungalow there at Meherabad. By that time, the daily discussions had been going on about Baba's plans to establish that boarding school. But Baba was at times disgusted with the enthusiasm, like Babajan's birthday that had been celebrated at the end of January. One thing that Baba established was this: nobody knew when Babajan's birthday was, but the previous year, Baba established it as January 28th. And so it's always considered and celebrated as January 28th. But Baba was not happy with the lackluster attention to Babajan's birthday that year, so this was one more thing. It was a difficult life for them because they would be reprimanded for not being enthusiastic, but then that didn't give them enthusiasm. It was very difficult. They had to also be natural, be honest. So hard to do. On the 7th, after some discussion, the next day, Baba asked the Mandali to sign another agreement, and they had to promise to stay with him for 3 years without expectations of material or spiritual benefit. And this is one of the first times we see that term, without expectations of material or spiritual benefit. They had to stay with him because of a sense of not duty, but an internal inspiration from his love, from his presence. One of those days, Chuggan was married when he was very young, but he wasn't living with his wife. And one of Chuggan's relatives came to Meherabad, informing him that as Chuggan's sister was being married, he was expected to attend the wedding. And there was discussion about Chuggan then beginning his worldly life with his wife that he had married some years before, when he was very young, 10 years before he knew of Baba. So he went back on his own there and discussed it with his wife, who he very rarely had a conversation with. What happened is, Baba was reluctantly invited by the family, Chuggan's family, to attend the wedding, which was about 5 miles away, a walk down the railroad tracks to the south, to a village called Akolner. So Baba went with some of the Mandali and Chuggan to the wedding that day. But along the way, Baba was giving him hints, Chuggan hints on the board. Be careful. Be very wary of the clutches of Maya, all these things. Be strong. They got to Chuggan's village, and it took them some time to find actually the house where the wedding reception, the wedding was taking place. They got there late, it was in process. And Baba was not received well. These were Brahmins who didn't regard any non-Brahmin as being have any possibility of spiritual potential. So Baba was actually rudely spoken to, rudely treated. And the Mandali knew, of course, they had to follow Baba's lead. So they just watched Baba, and he just tolerated the whole thing impassively. So that went on, but Chuggan was observing all of this thing. Now Chuggan at the same time was being pressured to the conversation, and the insults to Baba were that, why are you staying with this person? Who does he think he is? It's time for you to lead the life you've been fated. You should be living with your life, or with your wife, and continue your occupation here. Chuggan was dedicated to the spiritual life. This went on, and at a certain point, Baba told Chuggan, you have to make up your own decision. I can't make that for you. And it went on with this abuse to Baba while he's there, and Chuggan is waiting, and Baba's not leaving, and ultimately Chuggan says, okay, I'll stay. And Baba has a look like he's disappointed. Eventually they all leave. There was one other person who invited them for tea. They weren't even really invited to the reception. It was really bad treatment. So Baba and the Mandali walked back to Meherabad. Along the way, Baba's making remarks. Too bad, Chuggan's such a good boy. See the clutches of Maya. He's fallen. And it would make comments about Chuggan. They walked back. There was some discussion. Through that next day, Baba saying, too bad, Chuggan, what happened? At the same time, somebody says, perhaps Chuggan is just acting. Baba said, you think? Well, how would it be? And he says, maybe this, maybe that. Baba said, you think this and that? And suddenly Says, maybe Chuggin will come here with his wife. We have family quarters. We should make accommodation for Chuggin. But Bobby said he's leaving. He's going to live with his wife. Anyway, whatever he said, we'll be ready. And sure enough, later on that evening, word comes from the Arnagon Police Patel that Chuggin had come there, took off all of his clothes except for his underwear and handed them to the Police Patel and wandered off into the hills, into the field somewhere. So now that message comes and Baba sends some of the Mandali, go look, start looking for Chuggin. They walked across the tracks, and at that point one of them called, there was Chuggin coming down from the hill. And Chuggin came back and narrated the story. He said with the treat, he said what he said because he didn't want Baba to be continually mistreated like he was. So he knew then Baba would go back. His plan was never to stay there, but he said that was at that point that he gave his wife the ultimatum, telling her that my life is with Meherabad, it is a spiritual life. You are welcome to stay with me if you accept those conditions, and those conditions will be whatever he dictates. If you're all right with that, you may come with me. And she readily accepted, against the wishes of her family also. So Chuggin had relayed all this, but he said he was so depressed with the state of things that on his way back his mind was agitated. He decided he's going to commit suicide. So he gave everything to the Police Patel and wandered off, but he didn't. He was wandering, his mind was spinning, he said. He ended up suddenly, he didn't know where he was, and there he was on the hill. So he recognized where he was and he walked down the hill, and then he ran into the Mandali, and that's how the whole thing was resolved. And Baba allowed Chuggin to come and stay at Meherabad with his wife. That evening, they went to the wedding of Ramchandra Gadekar in Ahmednagar, a low-caste person who was a very dedicated disciple of Baba's. And the contradiction in treatment was very obvious. Baba was an honored guest. All the people there wanted to have his darshan. They were happy to have him there. They were sad to see him leave. So what a difference. And Baba pointed out, you see the contrast between these people. The Mandali wanted to celebrate Baba's birthday in that big way, but Baba was indifferent. What he really wanted to do, he said for his birthday in 1927, was bathe 150 poor boys. But specifically he wanted poor boys with skin diseases. So they had to attempt to find these 150 boys with skin diseases. And after some great effort, Pendu said, Baba, we could get so many, but we couldn't get 150 with skin diseases. Baba said, okay, make up the balance with just regular poor boys. But he wanted that. So on the 17th, on the hill, in that room, which is now the Meherabad Hill Library, Baba and the Mandali bathed those 150 poor boys in the morning. Baba himself did the work accompanied by pairs of the Mandali at a time. As they got towards the end of the group, the Mandali who hadn't given a bath to the boys, he said, each one of you must give a bath to at least one of the boys here. That was all done in that room on the south. And in the end, the hot water was left. Baba said, now the Mandali should take a bath here also. And after that, they all had a lunch on the north side of the tank rooms, where the tin shed is now. The next day, Baba's birthday happened. It was not anywhere near as big as the year before, though hundreds of people came. Maybe a few thousand, not 50,000. This year, however, the Mandali were prepared and there were cameras there that took a number of good photographs. Unfortunately, I don't have any of them with me. I couldn't get access to them from here. So I can't show you anything from that day. But for Baba's birthday celebration that day, a decorated pandal had been erected on the site of the original Sai Darbar. The special enclosure was again made for the ceremonial bath behind the table house, which was set again in its original position beneath that tree there near the Dooney. And after the ceremonial bath, Baba was accompanied to the Sai Darbar stage for the traditional Hindu birthday ceremony that they would like to do. And before lunch, he came and sat by that neem tree. Mara remembered that scene. There was that neem tree near Sai Darbar. And he came and sat by the neem tree where he distributed prasad to the villagers, what was remaining of the prasad. Later in the afternoon, they wanted the palanquin procession up the hill again, but this year Baba refused to be carried in it. So one of the photographs we have that we found a few years ago, shows Baba walking up alongside that thing, going up the hill. After the women's arti and singing was over, he agreed to be carried down at least in it. And an excerpt from Shanji's diary for that day reads, because he had agreed to be carried down, it was almost a great fight amongst the Mandali in trying to shoulder the precious palki with the personification of love seated therein. On the 9th of March, Baba moved his official seat back to the table cabin near the Dooney and had one of the grinding stones installed there in the ground so he could continue the grinding work there. And he casually remarked that day that he would remain there at his seat for the next 1,200 years. So it was taken in a few different ways. Baba had the habit of changing his seat around, but now he made this comment, his seat would be there for 1,200 years. Of course, he's not going to be there, so it had a deeper meaning than that. It means that Meherabad in itself has a great impact for at least this period. The daily routine of work was still interspersed with the games, Baba's fascinating explanations, and the parade of musicians who were always deeply inspired whenever they could get a chance to sing for Baba. As the discussions for the new Meher Ashram boarding school continued, so did the trait of Baba's occasional peculiar illnesses. He was very particular in how the new institution should be advertised to the public. Baba insisted that there could be no compromise in the primary emphasis of spiritual training in this new school. Even though the basic education would surpass government standards. And as far as possible, he wanted teachers who were willing to work there only for their daily needs, without pay. Because he put it like this, so that their own spiritual benefit would not be forfeited by material gain. He admitted to the Mandali earlier that the whole scheme of a free boarding school was merely an inducement to enable him to put as many as possible in the spiritual line, to give them all the benefit of his close contact, and to mold their morals and characters in an ideal way. In the meantime, the girls' school that had been reopened in the village, it was reopened in the village, I think, in either the old bungalow or Maruti Patel's compound. As the enrollment of the regular boys' school had increased, the higher classes were officially separated into Hazrat Babajan High School on March 1st. On April 7th, the enrollment passed 70. At 5 p.m. the next evening, Baba called a meeting of the selected members of the Mandali at the Jopti and informed them that he had decided to open the long-promised ashram at Meherabad. Then, still in an earnest yet lighter vein, Baba spelled out, "You all should give your sincere opinion on all these questions I put before you. Otherwise, you'll get the birth of frogs in your next birth, and you'll be eaten by the Chinese in a great war there." After long discussions, the following points were decided about by a majority of votes of those assembled. 1. The new ashram, to be known as Meher Ashram, would be temporarily open pending a more suitable accommodation made ready in the cottage in the village what was formerly occupied by Kakashane, we now call the family quarters. Number 2, the ashram inmates were to have no connection whatsoever with anybody or anything outside the ashram boundary. Not to come in contact with even the rest of the Mandali, excepting for the purposes of their studies and education in the existing school, and that too during school hours only. Bairamji, assisted by Pendu, Chagan and Sidhu, to be in charge of managing the ashram and carrying out the work of the institution strictly according to the rules that may be laid down by Baba. Number 4, Rustam to be in charge of the Mandali, managing the affairs of the Mandali. Now, this day Baba gave new names, new nicknames to certain ones of the Mandali. 5. The following designations are given to the respective officers, and henceforth they should be called and known by these names. Bairamji now becomes Bua Sahib. Kekushru Afsari now becomes Rao Sahib. Rustam, in charge, was Bade Sahib. And Dake, who was the principal of the school, was Principal Sahib. Now, through the years, the two nicknames stuck till the end of their lives, that is, Bua Sahib and Rao Sahib Afsari. After this, Baba assigned different duties to the Mandali members who had nothing particular to do or were not occupied full-time. As he conveyed, "I never like to see anybody idle and without work." Accordingly, Jal was appointed as an orderly to Baba. Padri was also asked to do the extra labor, extra duty of a teacher in the school for 3 hours daily. He was teaching Gujarati. Besides looking after his usual dispensary work. Likewise, Rustam was also ordered to do the work of teaching for 3 hours daily, in addition to his duties as the Mandali manager. And Rustam was teaching Farsi. Vishnu was appointed a full-time teacher again in the school. And many more of the minor changes were made in the duties of almost all of the Mandali. Instructions and hints were given to make ready all the necessary timetables and rules, and in short, all the arrangements were begun, and necessary institutions were given by Baba to bring about the new change into force from May 1st. I think I forgot to switch. This photograph was taken by Bob. I should have showed you this earlier. This is one of the rare photographs, really fine photograph. This is Baba sitting with his back to the cable, the table cabin again, inside the bath enclosure. The bath enclosure, the ceremonial bath enclosure, was half of that, but I don't have it with me.
Okay, this was under the tree or?
This is
outside or-
beneath the tree by the Dooney. Right? This dog was a dog that they had during that period that was given to Baba by Upasi Maharaj, named Madari. But this dog was hit by a truck at Meherabad in March 1927. This is why we know the specific period of this photograph. It's most likely February 1927. Now, the dog had a habit of, whenever Arti was rung, the dog would run and sit near Baba like this during the Arti. He also would run whenever the dinner bell was rung. But this is one of the beautiful, rare photographs of Baba during that time. It's a good photograph to show in combination when we see that special setup of Baba's Jopti with the bathroom behind it and the veranda in the front of it. Jopti, I mean Baba's table cabin with the bathroom behind it and the Dooney in front of it. It's a good combination. Let's go to the next image, please. This was a photograph of Baba taken during 1927. I like to show this photograph for a specific reason. This shows Baba wearing the Kamli coat, which he started wearing in 1922. This coat was given to him by Yeshwantarao, the close disciple of Upasi Maharaj, who is very close to Baba and all the Mandali. Baba is wearing those chappals there, the sandals that were made by Kanaba Gadekar, the cobbler from Amanagar, who was doing the work for Gulmai's family, and she had these chappals made for Baba in 1922. He wore both of those for about 7 years, rarely taking them off. He took the coat off. He rarely did not wear those chappals. He would have them repaired and immediately wear them again. So if you go to Meherabad and see them in the museum, they look ragged. They've been repaired so many times. The coat also begins to look quite different, but the reason we want you to see this in 1927, this is in the original old mess quarter bungalow, is because the condition of the coat here in 1927 is still quite good. Discussing his silence one day, Baba remarked, "It was not without any reason or spiritual significance that I have so long observed silence. It is to lessen the difficulties and bear the burdens of the members of the circle who are to be realized and who otherwise would have had to undergo certain afflictions. I will continue the silence, eventually getting so physically disabled as to be unable to eat and drink. So much so that my face would be turned," whatever that term means, "and my hands and feet would look as if paralyzed. This would be the last stage of my suffering, and after this, I would open my mouth and begin to speak." Since the return to Meherabad, the men had been staying in parts of the bungalow, with the boys' school occupying one of the two halls, the main halls there. But now Baba wanted to use the building entirely for the high school. So on April 20th, construction began on a new Mandali Makan north. That Makan was north of the well, where the Dharamshala used to be during the first long stay at Meherabad. So if we look at this, it is in this area here, between the well and Gilori Shah, where the new Makanikas was built for the second long stay. So construction work began on that The official opening of Meher Ashram was on May 1st with an enrollment of 10 boys of different Hindu castes. Many of them were sons of close disciples who had been with Baba in the first long stay. Now, and the students and staff would reside there together. It was a boarding school, so the teachers, who were the limited staff at the time, beginning, and the students would stay there together. The day the girls' school was transferred to the post office, that day the girls' school that was in the family quarters was transferred to the post office veranda. And another significant event that day occurred, that was Baba's closest disciple, Gustaji, was put on silence that May 1st, which, as you know, he maintained for the rest of his life. And Baba, in order to make it easy for Gustaji, kept him apart from the other Mandali. He was to stay on the veranda of the Jopti and tend the garden of the Jopti. So that was the beginning of a different phase of life for Gustaji also. Now the Mandali had been ordered to meditate. It's an interesting thing. Before Baba started the Meher Ashram, when they returned to Meherabad, the Mandali had been given an order to meditate for 1 hour a day. During that phase in January, when there were meetings, Baba wanted to up that time allotment to 2 hours a day. And Pendu protested. I said, "I'm sorry, Baba, I can't do this." He said, "I can hardly do 1 hour a day." Padri was also not of a meditating nature. So eventually, with the work and all that, Padri and Pendu were excused from the meditation because they were really workers anyway. They were involved more so in the work, in the practical side of things. But Baba used the men's meditation as a preparation for the ashram environment, because this is what would be a main focus for the boys in the ashram school. Baba reprimanded a few of the other Mandali for disobeying his order to meditate for 1 hour daily during that period in May. They begged Baba's forgiveness, but despite that, he had passed a sentence. They had a new penance. Those people who refused to meditate had to take part in reading the Sexton Blake novels during the evening, what they called nightclub at Meherabad around the Jopti. So every evening, one of the Mandali, who was now Ramju, Padri, and Dake, were the readers of whatever Sexton Blake novel was the nightly entertainment. Upasi Maharaj's birthday was celebrated again in a grand style at Meherabad. Starting in the morning, a special bath enclosure behind the table house again there. Groups by turns were allowed to wash, this time Baba's feet. Not the full bath, just his feet. Then Rustam carried Baba on his shoulders through the crowd to the pandal, where it was set up, the same place where Sai Darbar used to be, for the arti and prayers. And again, Baba was buried in a huge pile of garlands and flowers there. Over 4,000 people came that day and enjoyed that birthday feast while the musicians performed throughout the day. The visitors had brought an abundance of nice fruit, and it was at the height of the mango season, in May. And knowing that Baba would most likely give it all to the children then, one evening, Jal, Padri, Vishnu discussed among themselves, all those mangoes are going to go to waste on the boys sitting there in the bungalow. Baba's in the Jopti. They just sneak over. So they went very quietly way around. Just as they had gotten in, Baba said to Masaji, who was outside as the attendant to the Jopti, Better check the bungalow to see if somebody may have left a lamp on in there. As he should. Okay. So he went over to the bungalow, and looking through the window, he does see a light, and he sees Padre Jal Vishnu with a ladder trying to climb up and get mangoes from the hanging basket up there, hanging in the rafters. So quietly comes up behind and says, "Can you get some for me too?" And they panic and run away knowing that they were caught. So he reports it back to Baba, who has a good laugh about it. And the next morning, Baba called them in. And, "What do you three think?" And Padre would remember this and tell us this, the way Baba had gestured. "I have eyes everywhere. I see thousands of miles away. Do you think I don't see you right here with me?" Let's see, here we are. One day then, Baba went to the village Shinde. You know, Shinde is on the way to Meherabad. He was invited out there. Dake Palkar's relatives were there. And it was just a day of fun. At a certain point, Baba was playing marbles. He played marbles ever since he was a kid. And while he was playing marbles with some of the mandli, and they were just enjoying a nice day there, Baba said on the board, "There is a new avatar coming to the world now in this age. Right now that avatar is playing marbles." There's a problem with rain. Again, water always was a problem at Meherabad. And Padre was thinking practically. It was his responsibility, being superintendent of Meherabad. How are you going to run this ashram with no water? He said, "Baba, what we should do is tear the dooni out now. Just take it all apart. We'll build a new dooni, dismantle this one, build a new dooni in the same spot and light it, and then rain will come. Every time we light the dooni, it rains, so let's just do it. We need water." You think that's the right idea? What else can we do, Padre says. Baba said, "Okay, you'll get rain by June 1st. If not, we'll take up your plan. It's less than a week till June 1st. And it's a hot blazing sun. But on the 28th, then it rained some. Enough so that at least the promise was fulfilled. But then again, the next day it rained again. So they started getting this water. But still, there wasn't all that much water. So Baba started this new thing. One day it was a little hot, early June. And Baba said to Adi, "It's a little hot. Go outside and shout for it to rain." "What? How do I shout?" "Just say, 'Come, rain, come.' Shout that." So Adi went outside and said, "Come, rain, come." And he came inside and Baba said, "You didn't shout loud enough." So again, Adi goes out and shouts, "Come, rain, come." And suddenly the wind and the thunder happens and it rains. All right. Again, a few days later, he did the same thing, I think, with Vishnu. So this is how Baba is bringing water for the ashram. On June 12th, Baba gave the first hint about the hill because there was always this discussion about the larger facility. Rustam wanted to spend money, and he was really intent on doing this properly. He wanted to present Baba's activities as being first class to the world. He was not really happy with these facilities that were bamboo on wooden poles. Didn't look good. Didn't look like much. So he wanted one permanent school that should be really solid, and then people should know that Mayor Baba is serious about education. Baba was more interested in not spending the money that he had been given, because his specific work was what was with the boys for that opportunity of spiritual training. It had nothing to do so much as education, though they did receive better than a standard education in a very short period of time. So on the 12th, Baba gave the first hint that the real facility, the best place for it, would be up on the hill in the tanks. Around that time also they got the first Petromax lamp. It was a 400 candle power Petromax lamp. So that really changed life at Meherabad to some extent. Because now they had pretty good light before, but whenever they had a festival they had to bring these bright lamps from Nagar on a temporary basis. But now they had the permanent very bright light they could pump up as a petrol-fired lamp. On 16th of June, Baba gave the ashram boys a chant to sing every day, and they would sing this chant at breakfast, specifically at sunrise for 15 minutes. And that's when the 7 names of God as we know it today was given. Hari Paramatma Allah Ramaz, God Yazdadan Hu, was given then, that day. It would also be recited after classes while all the boys would stand with their folded hands facing the sun. Again. Let's look at the next image, please. Okay, can we rotate this? Why is it tinted like that? It looks like a negative color. I guess it's okay. Something not right with that. So as the Meher Ashram grew, on the 18th, Baba decided to shift it up to the hill. On that day, the 18th, Ghani was there visiting again, and Baba somehow enticed him to come and take part in the ashram.
Left side. The other one.
Okay, let's just forget it. That image is not, somehow something's happened. This image is not very good.
One, the circular one. Yeah, that.
On the 19th and the 20th, okay, on the 19th and the 20th, the doors were broken in first to the east side of the room. Starting on the 18th, they made some effort, but they could only get 2 rocks out of the wall. If you've seen that construction of the tank on the hill, it's really solid. And they couldn't master the technique of removing these rocks on the first day. Next day, though, they were successful in getting the rock out of the east doorway, enough so that they could get through and place a door opening, a door jamb in there with the door. And the next day, on the 20th of June, they broke the doorway into the west room. Erich remembered that was one of the days he had come with his father, because one of the people who helped a lot was Nashwan Satta, his uncle. And because of his labor, they were really successful in being able to do it in a few days. Erich remembered that he was there with his father at the time also, and Baba handed him a crowbar. He was 11 years old. He said, well, I was just 11, but I tried my best and worked there trying to dislodge one of those stones until I had lost my breath. And Baba said, good enough. And okay. The next day, I don't know what happened to the color there.
Yeah.
Whatever, this totally screwed up. Okay. Can't really see anything there. That's not much. Anyway, those doorways were opened here and on the other side. This is the kitchen for the Meher Ashram. This photograph was taken later, but we'll look at that for a few seconds here. During the following 10 days, the openings were made and secured, the door jambs were installed. The tata and sheet metal buildings were constructed there for the kitchen and dining room and some of the classes. The bath stalls and toilets for the ashram boys were there further to the north.
Flip over the paper map.
Yeah,
You're up the hill now.
right. We're looking at that. So that was done here. Kitchen, dining, bath, and meditation cells at the time.
There we go.
Okay. So in the meantime, the boys would sleep in the east. No, this is the wrong thing here. Okay.
That's the east room.
No, this is the next photograph. We'll leave it there, okay? Just leave it. Okay, so the tata and sheet metal rooms were constructed. During that time, the end of that month, there was one more thing Baba wanted, and that was on the opposite side of the hill from the approach to the hill, there was a cabin built. Small cabin of the usual woven bamboo panels, sheet metal roof. Baba stayed there also for the first time in that cabin on the hill, June 30th, 1927. The next day was the grand opening for Meher Ashram on the hill when all the boys were shifted there to the east room. The boys began sleeping there in the east room and their belongings were put there. That was their first dormitory. This is that east room with that new door in. And you can still see that the original door is still intact that was into the tank, along with the new door that had been installed. This photograph was taken sometime later in September, but it gives you an idea of what that look was. Each of the boys was issued a uniform, bedding and towels, and a small trunk to store everything in. And they were given these caps, scarves, buttons, chappals, very well taken care of. The new school furniture, by the way, so now you had the opening, the grand opening of the school was there on the 1st. The schoolboys that had been staying with the Mandali down the hill, that is Hazrat Babajan High School boys, were then shifted to the family quarters in Aurangabad, so that the Mandali could all stay in their quarters there. And that was called the branch school. The new school now that was shifted, it was Hazrat Babajan High School, was called the branch ashram. And at that time, Rao Sahib Afsari was put in charge of that branch ashram in Aurangabad. A few days later, Baidul arrived from Iran with the first 12 Zoroastrian boys and 2 Muslim boys from Iran to be enrolled into the ashram. And by now these classes were being taught in English, Marathi, Urdu, Gujarati, and Farsi. Now what happened is any boy under the 4th standard would study his vernacular, native Indian vernacular, Gujarati, Marathi, or Hindi Urdu. If they were above the 4th standard, English was prerequisite or Farsi. But the boys from Iran also had to learn English. So Baba wanted these boys to learn languages. It was very important. The new school furniture had arrived a few days later, and Baba and some of the older boys and the Mandali took the task of keeping the furniture together, sanded, repaired, and refinished. And during that month, Baba informed the Mandali that he would soon have to fast for 6 months there. He said, I will lock myself up, but all the arrangements in the ashram must be ready before I do so. There will be a spiritual outburst here at Meherabad, which many sages already know about. Among the temporary tata and steel sheets that was that hut, and during that month, there, Baba ordered the Mandali to take that hut down, but on that site, he wanted them to excavate a pit, which at the time they just called a khadda, which means a dug pit. And it was lined with masonry with some steps leading down into it from the south side. Ramju had written, at the time, no one could make head nor tail of what this thing was. Alaba, who is here in this photograph, as an ashram boy, Meher ashram boy, this was taken sometime in September, I believe, recalled that after that new pit was constructed in line, but before there was anything built over the top of it, one day Baba had each of the ashram boys come down, descend the steps one by one, and each of them washed his feet in the bottom of that pit. This was the first activity that happened on that site. The Meher ashram boys washing Baba's feet inside the pit. By the middle of that month, August, a cabin had been constructed over the pit of planks with that sheet metal roof. This is the first known photograph showing that cabin right here in the background. That's it. The crypt cabin, the earliest picture of the crypt cabin is right there. On August 8th, Asfandiar Vasali, who was a nephew of Baidul's, who was taken from Iran into the ashram, asked Baba to be exempted from his studies. He said he couldn't think of studying anymore. Baba asked him why. He had been listening to the poetry of the Persian perfect masters, and had put him into an alternate state of consciousness, and he couldn't think of other things. He could only think of Baba and God, he said. So Baba, he was the first one of the boys, and Baba said, okay, for you, don't worry about studying. Start keeping silence and begin meditating. And Baba would give him directions on how specifically he should meditate. So he, having lost all interest in life except Baba, was encouraged to pull on for a little longer with the school studies for a few more days until Baba had specifically arranged these things for him to do. On that same day, another boy from Iran, had come to join the ashram because he had seen an advertisement. See, when Meher Ashram was opened on May 1st, it was advertised in many newspapers. And there was great publicity on May 1st when the ashram opened. There were a number of photographs taken and printed in newspapers. I would love to have seen some of those, but so far we haven't seen any of those. Number of newspapers with articles. So Abdullah Pakravan had received information about the Meher Ashram at the time, and he came to join the ashram. He was only interested in the free education, a high quality free education. That's why he came. But he was admitted, and he began attending classes at Hazrat Babajan High School at the branch ashram. So that cabin was built above the crypt, and there was also a platform built to the east of the cabin. And that stone platform, about 22 feet wide and about 26 feet long, about so high off the ground, was there to the east. And there was a specific plan for that. It was a place where Baba would meet people. And later that was also covered. by the 16th of August, that became Baba's official seat on the hill. Baba wanted to really prepare things and really focus on Meher Ashram on the hill from September 1st. So a lot of other work that was happening, including the diary work and the different writing work, was Baba wanted it finished up, ended by the end of August, to begin that new phase September 1st. The area northeast of the ashram, which is up in here, in this area, that you know, was groomed to provide a playground and cricket pitch. Can we see the next image, please? There. This is a cropped, close-up, rare photograph of Baba playing cricket on the hill at Meherabad. And we know it's from this time because of the condition, again, of the Kamli coat in this photograph. But somebody snapped a good photograph of Baba swinging the bat. Isn't that good? So the Meher Ashram team would play the Meherabad team. So see, Meher Ashram now, the hill is Meher Ashram, Meherabad is down the hill, which includes the branch ashram boys, the older Babajan high school boys. Meher Ashram would play Meherabad, and sometimes a team from Ahmednagar. Nashawan Satta was involved, and one of the disciples named Borkar were involved, and a school for boys in Ahmednagar. And one of those teams might come out, and so they might have triangular matches, might have a day of cricket, always the cricket playing. This is one of the great rare shots. Really good. One of the boys in the back observing. And the thing is, whatever team Baba was on invariably won. He was a great cricket player, because he was on the opposite team, he would bring the best out of any of the opposing teams. And whenever they had these matches, everybody liked it because they would serve tea without milk. Even if they had to bring the milk from Ahmednagar, there would be tea with milk, not without milk. Tea with milk on the days of the cricket matches at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And on the ground, the level ground to the east of the bungalow down the hill, that area was groomed flat to make a tennis court. That's another sport they began at that time, playing tennis there, and volleyball. To the east of the bungalow down the hill. And some evenings Baba would play chess, especially if Ghani was there, then he would engage Ghani in a game of chess. Like that. And of course, he still wanted the women to continue getting their exercise. Now, they were down the hill here. I'll go back to this one. At that time, the women were not staying here in the post office. They were staying in the bathroom. And there was a compound built around the bathroom to the east of it, a larger compound, where they would do the cooking. They were still doing the cooking for the ashram boys up the hill. And still sequestered there. But Baba wanted...
That's bathrooms.
Bathroom.
The bathing rooms.
Bathroom building,
Yeah.
but it's very confusing to people who... We call it the bathroom building. They insist on that name. It doesn't quite fit, but that was the name, so we used it, the bathroom building. It's bathing. A bathing room from World War I. So they lived in there in a compound to the east, Baba. It was just big enough to set up a badminton net across it. So whenever they had spare time, which wasn't much, in the afternoon, Baba wanted them to play badminton in there. And that's how they got their exercise. That's right here. So this was the building. There was a screened entry in the front, and there was this enclosure of woven bamboo in the back, and across the middle there was a net placed so they could play badminton there.
I think that is still there, right?
No, that was torn down the following year. Before Baba again was up the hill without leaving the hill for a period, Baba was down the hill, and the monsoon again in 1927 was feeble. So villagers again came to Baba asking him to help them with more rain. So they were sitting near the Dooni the next day, and Adi repeated the frustration of the Mandali also, that there were floods in other places, but somehow around Ahmednagar, especially to the south of Ahmednagar where they were, it was called the rain shadow area. And his frustration was, Baba, you picked this place, you took this place, and we never get enough rain here. So Baba was wearing his Kamli coat, even though it was warm. Baba would still wear this coat. Baba was wearing his Kamli coat. So he got up and took the coat off. And suddenly again, wind, clouds form, thunder, lightning, and it begins to rain for some time. And Baba puts the coat on and everything clears up. He says, I can do it if I need to do it. You don't understand what this thing is, he said. You won't ever be able to understand the significance of this coat, he told him. On October 20th, the students took their exams, which were followed by the Diwali holiday for 4 days. And again, they entertained themselves with cricket, singing, and dramatic performances. And one day, Baba took the boys and the men on a picnic. But on November 2nd, Baba increased the restriction of the boys' involvement with the outside world by ordering them not to speak with anyone outside Meher Ashram except their teachers, and then again, only during classes. And this rule that he had mentioned before was now strictly enforced. The next day, several crates of books for the school were delivered. Baba personally sorted, arranged, and stacked them in piles next to his seat on the platform. Let's go to the next image, by the way. This is Baba being pulled in the Tonga. The rickshaw, not Tonga, rickshaw. This rickshaw came on September 19th that year, 1927, and I believe this photograph was taken on that day. Arangan is in the background there. Not Arangan, but the trees, what we call the Ambawadi, along the riverbank is in the background. So the next day, Baba had the several crates of books delivered, and he sorted them, didn't let anybody touch this pile of books. He kept them next to him on the platform for one day. And the following day, Baba personally distributed these books to each of the boys, who knew by then but that they were receiving more than books from Baba. Let's go to the next image, please. This is a view of one of the classrooms. That classroom was most likely here on the hill. Is this the hill here? Let's see. Or is it here? Here's the hill. That classroom was most likely here. So the crypt cabin is here, and that classroom was there to the south. What happened to the picture?
Just I'm trying to show that.
Okay. So that's Rausab Afsari, and he's teaching the Persian boys English here in this classroom. That's a good shot.
These are all Persian boys?
These are all Persian, all Farsi-speaking boys learning English.
And one of them is that boy, right? His family lives in Nordeen.
Yes, he's an uncle to Farshid. the son lives out in the northwest. These are those two boys right here. Two brothers. Khusro and Kodia or something like that. I don't see Aspandia Vasali in here. He might be in the back, but I don't see him there. Pardon? He may not have been in this class because this was after, he was the first one to receive individual special orders, and he may not have been in the English class. The day after that was another Hindu holiday, and Baba allowed some of the women to give him another ceremonial bath in that same bath enclosure behind the table cabin. One of the new young ashram boys, named Shiva, put his head down near the bath stool. And when they asked him what he's doing down there, why is he down there, he says, "I'm washing away my sins in the holy water of Meherabad." So Baba made him sit quietly for the remainder of the bath on one of those stools you saw beside there. But then he had his foot in the door by that point. So that night Baba allowed him to sleep near him. Now I'm trying to remember, Baba was still staying there in the table cabin down the hill. So Baba allowed him to sleep near him, or was it the Jopti? I don't recall. He was switching back and forth then. At least for some time, until the boy got up and then he wanted to just sleep on Baba's chappals. The next day, Shiva was also put on silence, joining a few of the other boys, such as Asfandir Vasali, who was the first to be put on silence. On November 10th again, Baba began that prolonged fast that he was talking about months before. But Mara had persuaded Baba to at least have some coffee with a little milk in it during the day. So she persuaded Baba that she would supply him with a thermos of coffee every day. And it was brought up the hill by that one boy. Also that day was the second anniversary of the Duni. And so it was lit that evening again. But this time it rained almost continuously for the next 3 days. So much so that this time the villagers came pleading with Baba, "Please stop the rain now, Baba." On the 12th, the schoolboys were brought to Baba in groups so that he could wash the mud off their feet. This time Baba washed their feet. He wanted to wash the feet of each of the boys. And then he gave them each some medicine to prevent colds. Within a few more weeks, the enrollment of Hazrat Babajan High School had surpassed 100 students. Since Muslim boys were coming from as far away as Iran, the Indian Mughal Muslims felt encouraged to get their own boys admitted into the ashram, but Baba was reluctant to admit some of them. There was interference by some of the other parents, this time Muslim parents, who promised that they wouldn't interfere. But of course, once their boys were in there, couldn't the diet be better, and shouldn't this, and Baba. Baba was reluctant to admit this boy, Syed Aga Ali. He was Syed Ali, Syed, something like that. Though his father had pleaded for a reconsideration because of this, the two sons of the previous Mughal and the trouble they had with him. Baba had made a comment, these Mughals are not good to their word, they're promise breakers. However, Ali himself began to argue his own case intelligently, and Rauseb felt that he was a good boy. So Rauseb pleaded with Baba on his behalf, and Baba admitted the boy. Let's go to the next photograph, please. From November 23rd, the spiritual instruction classes in the different languages were postponed. And Baba personally began giving his own regular evening discourses to the boys, usually in that West Tank room, which is now the museum. It was the assembly hall at that time. Through the alphabet board and visual examples, Baba conveyed his divine explanations as he had done before. But he began in simple terms that even the youngest of the boys could understand. The great picture of creation and its purpose was gradually revealed through Baba's explanations about the three worlds, evolution of consciousness through the various forms, reincarnation with heaven and hell, and involution of consciousness with the different types of persons and experiences on the spiritual path, and ultimately God and love. Ramju wrote that it made all who had the good fortune to be present hold their breath with amazement. Baba would end each nightly session by encouraging all to love him to their utmost. Now, these explanations are now being published in a book called
Tiffin Lectures.
Tiffin Lectures was the one from 1926 into the end of August 27. That has been published, and I don't know if it's printed yet, but it's ready. The next thing Ward Parks is working on is Baba's explanations to the boys, discourses to the boys. This is what we're talking about now. This went on through into the next month. On the morning of November 28th, around 10:30, Baba called a special meeting on the tennis court down the hill and explained to the boys, "At first I had intended to advance you gradually in the path, but the time of the great spiritual outburst that takes place in the world at long intervals is near at hand. And so I have changed the program. Very soon I'm going to advance a few amongst you who will be ready with love." Baba instructed a new teacher in the ashram to never lay a hand on the boys or scold them. He was told to put his heart into teaching the boys, but not to be concerned if they didn't listen. When the teacher soon realized that the boys weren't paying any attention to him, he saw that they were filling their notebooks with scribbling of some type. And when he went to investigate, he saw that they were all busy writing Meherabad, Meherabad. Not doing the lessons, just writing Meherabad. Or sentences. Sometimes they would write a sentence about Meherabad. Yet, despite this peculiar behavior, they all ultimately passed with high marks, without paying attention to their studies and writing Meherabad. On December 2nd, Baba opened also now a new special bhakti ward for spiritual seekers, which was called the Sadhak Ashram. There were 6 cells that were built here. These should be right here in a row. Right here. North of the crypt cabin. This photograph is of Baba sitting in the east window of the crypt cabin. The crypt cabin had 2 openings on this east side. There was this larger like door window here, and there was a screened opening here that allowed air to come into the cabin where Baba could still close the door but see out onto the playground and assembly grounds for the ashram boys there in front. That platform that we talked about would come out away from this 26 feet, and it would be about 22 feet wide. 2 of the mandali, Vishnu and Sidhu, were ordered to be the attendants for the Sadhak Ashram men. 5 men were put into one each of these rooms. The 6th one was left unoccupied. They were 5 men from different backgrounds and castes. There was one low caste Hindu, one higher caste Maratha, Manikar. There was a Hindu from Andhra, Gopalswamy, one of Baba's early disciples. Shahryar Mehrabanpur from Iran. And there was one Muslim. The Muslim was the first guy to run away after a few days. After some days, the experience was too much for him, and he ran away. That was Gulab Shah, one of Baba's early disciples. He had contact with Baba after that, but the sadhak ashram experience was too much for him. Because after some days, these men who were in the sadhak ashram started having these experiences, though Baba explained that they weren't really spiritual experiences. Anyway, they were to meditate, keep silence, and fast on water and milk. And Vishnu and Sidhu were to take care of their needs. They had to stay in seclusion in these cabins. The number of boys preferring meditation and concentration on Baba to studying or playing had gradually increased. They were separated into a special Prem group at this point, with Rauseb as their teacher and Baidul appointed as their manager. So he was called the Prem manager. And many of these boys were boys from Iran, and Baidul spoke Farsi also. On December 19th, Baba directed Gustaji to leave the Jopni compound down the hill and come up to stay in a room to the west. Another temporary cabin that was built, a little hut that was built to the west of Baba's crypt cabin. So Gustaji's brother Sorab was also at Meherabad at the time, and the two of them were told to stay in that room. The next day, after 40 days of that long fast, Baba began staying on the hill, confining himself in the cabin, in seclusion. He usually slept and bathed in the pit itself. Pendu was Baba's attendant during the days now, and Pendu would help Baba with his bath that was actually in the crypt pit. And every day he would have to collect the water then and also bring that out. At the time, he issued an order that no one, including the teachers and ashram authorities, should touch any of the boys. He would sit here in this window opening while the boys and some of the men sat on the platform. And Chanji began to refer to those evening discourses now being given exclusively from this window as the nightly love injection. The atmosphere of that love had already become really intense with Baba's fasting and his increased attention to the Meher ashram. And different boys would be found weeping for no apparent reason when they were apart from him. But on January 1st, 1928 now, it was an unusual day by any standards. As if contagious, most of the boys experienced spells of crying throughout the day. By 7 in the evening, every boy in the ashram was weeping uncontrollably.
So any activity, anything done?
Baba called more of the Mandali up the hill to witness. And they could only stand by dumbstruck. Now, what they could do, they were ordered, you can't touch them, you can't do it, you can't speak to them or touch. Baba only wanted them to come up and observe it. This is the effect. They've all become just mad in love with Baba. At 7:30, Baba made his appearance sitting there at that opening and putting his feet, Baba would stay in seclusion like this. He's sitting in seclusion, but he would put his feet outside of the window. And that's how he interacted. He gave the discourse on the alphabet board in seclusion inside the cabin, but his feet would be extended out the window. So that night at 7:30, he had the boys assembled there, and they were immediately pacified with his physical presence. And then Bob explained to them, your weeping means love. It's my love for you and your response to that. But you must also obey my orders. When I order you to stop crying, you should stop. Don't check your love, increase it, but obey my orders. Let's go to the next photograph. During recess on the playground the next day, another scene of weeping occurred. But when the gong rang to return to class, the boys regained control over their emotions. Though one of the boys, named Vasant, was unable to choke back his tears most of the day, saying that he felt he would go insane if he tried. Bob explained that madness for God was the next stage, when loving God becomes such an obsession that one forgets the whole world and the body. The love of the boys continued to increase every day, and Baba remarked to the Mandali, I have selected some for their love, some for their heart, and some for their head. About 20 of the boys are really sincere, because some of the boys now are also realizing that they really like to hang with Baba, although they didn't necessarily feel this intense love that the other guys were doing. But if they worked it up a little bit, they would be able to spend more time with Baba and wouldn't have to do the other things. So simultaneously, Baba was telling the Mandali this, you have to have a discerning eye. Some of these guys are good, but they're not like this. But Baba himself knew which ones, so he's made the statement. About 20 of them are actually authentic. They're really lost in it. One day, after a dozen soldiers passing by were given permission to come up the hill for Baba's darshan and salute him, that was the morning of January 6th, Baba ordered the school closed for the day and had the boys and the Mandali come up to the crypt room to participate in the washing of his feet and his back. Afterwards, Baba had his brother Baram, who is now in the ashram. Baba's brother Baram joined the ashram in July of 1927. He used to come and stay for some weeks, some days at least, but now he was officially one of the Mandali in the ashram also. So Baba had his brother Baram read out a declaration concerning a meeting of spiritual masters that had taken place in the crypt room the previous night, wherein it was decided that a great war would soon happen. This subject was not new to the Mandali. Since first coming to Meherabad, from time to time, Baba would refer to another inevitable world war, which would be much worse than the first one, but necessary before the manifestation of the avatar would happen. Baba had persuaded Abdullah Pakravan, the boy who had come only to study secular studies, to join the Meher ashram by November of 1927. And in that intimate atmosphere, he quickly began to awaken spiritually. Unable to focus his mind on anything except Baba, he was allowed to abandon his studies, and he took every opportunity to be with the Master there. But when that was not possible, he sat in his cell meditating. One evening, as Baba was discoursing there, outside the crypt room, Abdullah began to see the radiant effulgence of God everywhere, emanating from Baba. He cried out Baba's name and lost consciousness. From the next day, he found that without effort, his every thought was only of his beloved Baba. Years later, he commented that if the gist of that joyous and blissful state of love were to be written, the pen would break and the paper would tear in awe. Very poetic. Let's go to the next image, please. Before you do, let's go back once. You're way ahead. Get a drink of water while you're doing this.
On the left, second row.
Okay. That's it. Back again, please. This is sitting in Baba's crypt cabin. You might, in a better photograph at least, you would see the planks, the seams in the planks. These are some of the boys at the time. This is Abdullah Pakravan here. The Meher Ashram boys who were affected by the Prem. Okay, now let's go to the next image. Absorbed in that state of constant remembrance, he had become indifferent to food, water, cold, or heat, passing the hours in meditation and weeping. As the sun set on January 11th, Abdullah Pakravan was sitting near Baba as he was giving his usual nightly discourse. Suddenly, Abdullah wailed and swooned as Baba glanced at him. His physical eyes were closed, but his master had opened his inner eye. He was taken to the hospital down the hill, which was in the bungalow there, where he remained lost in the vision of his beloved Lord for 5 days. On the third day, Asfandyar Vasali went to visit his friend there and asked him, Abdullah, do you know me? He asked. Abdullah opened his eyes and replied, yes. Who am I? Vasali said, you are Baba. Vasali picked up a match from the matchbox. Remember the story? He held it up and asked him, do you see this? What is this? Baba, Abdullah said. Whenever Abdullah was asked, he could only reply, it's Baba. He was seeing Baba everywhere and in everything. On the fifth day, Baba directed the hospital staff to give Abdullah an enema. With this physical act, Abdullah gradually began to regain some worldly consciousness. Though he had lost all interest in the world, and he wept bitterly, losing his pure sight of God. The master began referring to Abdullah as Chota Baba, meaning little Baba. A few days later, he explained, Abdullah's present state is like a peer on the sixth plane. He now sees me in all. Although this is not a small achievement, it is not everything that one must achieve. The last and most important step is still left. He is not one with God. This realization cannot be given to anyone other than the circle members, except during avataric periods when a few extra persons are selected to be God realized. I have in mind to prepare 2 or 3 extra human beings for realization, and Abdullah is one of them. Although he has the sight of God now, he cannot be immediately God realized for certain reasons. First of all, the strain of that realized state would be too severe for his already strained and weakened body, which for the last 2 months has been in danger. His body may collapse any moment at the slightest shock. It is with great difficulty that he has been brought down to the gross from the material sphere, as you are well aware from the outward symptoms for the last 6 days. Then there is another more significant reason for the difficulty involved in bringing someone down after realization, and that is to make him regain full normal consciousness. This is the most difficult task of all. Majzoobs can easily be made, but not saliks or sadgurus. For this reason, Abdullah has been kept in reserve to be God realized with two others and brought down at the same time as the circle members. In the meantime, Abdullah may now be at ease, having achieved the sight of God. In his present state, he is worthy of devotion. He is worthy of worship by yogis who may fall at his feet, and with much benefit to themselves and no harm to him. For he has now been freed from all bindings. When he is realized, he will prove a great asset to his Islamic community, being my special representative in Arabia. Now, Baba is not talking about this lifetime, but obviously it would be his next birth when that happens. Baba had a special room built for Chota Baba in the space between the crypt room and the Sadhak ashram there to the north. And Baba had a special, at an opening cut in the crypt room wall, that wooden crypt room wall there, behind there. And there was a thin veil of fine cloth hung between Baba's room and this new room. It was almost a metaphor, symbolic, a very thin veil between Baba and Chota Baba. There was another person named Rajaram who also began to have experiences of the mental world. Though it was objective and not subjective sixth plane, it was more objective fifth plane experience. He said Rajaram was not as advanced as Chota Baba, but the two of them were placed in the special room, symbolically separated from Baba by a thin veil between his crypt cabin and their space. Nobody had ever been staying this close to Baba. It was something the Mandali understood, that he was a greatly advanced person, and there was great significance to this. During that month, now let's go to the next image, please. During that month, Rajaram, Lobaji, and a number of the other boys also swooned with deep experience and wept when they could not be in the Master's presence. The Mandali also wept occasionally, but due to different circumstances. Since the first boys' school was established at Meherabad, if Baba found fault with anyone, of course, he would usually punish one of the Mandali. Having firm faith in his every action, they did not mind that, but it was most difficult for them to tolerate Baba's taking slapping or caning himself on behalf of one of their mistakes. After lunch on January 17th, Baidul came complaining to Baba with a sample of the undercooked rice. The Baba sent for Chuggan and demanded, "Are you trying to kill my boys cooking rice like this? Don't you feel ashamed of yourself?" He ordered Rustam to give Chuggan 4 strokes with a cane and sent him away with more reprimanding. Soon Baba sent a few of the Mandali to bring Chuggan back, but they couldn't find him. Now, in an agitated mood, Baba told Mehraji and Rauseb to join in the search quickly. After some time, they found Chuggan in the storeroom with a razor in his hand, just about to cut his own throat. So they stopped him just in time and escorted him back to Baba. Baidul began to cry at the sight of him, thinking that he was the cause of the possible death of Chuggan. And Baba too then. Chanji wrote of it, it was a wonder rarely seen. And through his tears, Baba spelled on the board, When you have surrendered your life to me, what right do you think you have to take it? And again he reminded him, as he had reminded Padre, bravery is in suffering the life. So, to live while dying. The resident women continued their life of service and devotion, sequestered in the bathing room compound down the hill. And they had seen how much Baba loved the boys, and the boys loved him. When they were allowed to come up the hill on January 1st and have Baba's darshan in celebration of Mehra's birthday that year on January 1st. Since Baba was in seclusion, the women thought that he might be forgetting them. So they thought it'd be nice to make him flower garlands and crowns. And the women would send these flower garlands and crowns up. Now every day, Valu, one of the women Mandali who lived in Arangan, was from Arangan, would return and pick flowers along the riverbank in Arangan and bring them, after they had finished all of their cooking duties, she would bring these flowers back to the bathroom building where they stayed at Lower Meherabad, and they would stay up to late hours in the night making these garlands and things, and keep them in a damp, cool cloth. The next morning, Khorshid's father, Kaikushu Masa, would come up the hill, and he was one of the few people who was allowed, on the behalf of the women, to see Baba every day. All the Mandali couldn't see Baba. It was only the few. He was in seclusion. But he was one who had the permission to report to Baba. So they would bring these flowers up, and this is that photograph captures Baba wearing these flowers that the women would prepare for him on a daily basis that would be delivered to Baba. Again, he's sitting in the crypt cabin, and you can see the planks covering the crypt. He's sitting above. This is Chota Baba and Rajaram, the two special boys of the time. On the 23rd, Baba stopped even drinking the coffee and the milk, and for the next 4 weeks, he took only hot water and plain weak tea. Fasting in seclusion in this crypt cabin. Let's go to the next picture, please.
When these boys actually going through these experiences, I understand their parents express concerns, so to Baba, not all, some of them.
By the time the Meher ashram happened, Baba had done so much preliminary work with these boys that the Arangan people, in general, knew that what they had there was something far above the ordinary. So, as far as the Arangan people went, they didn't give him much trouble. But you're going to see what other trouble he gets. Syed Aga Ali, that boy who was admitted in November, was also one of the ashram boys who was deeply affected during this time. But from the second week of January, Baba began to ignore him. Whenever Ali was called, he would be dispassionately dismissed without receiving the affection he had become used to, that he was expecting, that was given to the other boys. And though his heart was in a state of turmoil, Ali continued to carry out Baba's commands without complaint. But on the 28th, the ashram was given a holiday to celebrate Hazrat Babajan's birthday. And Baba remarked to the Mandali that Ali and Basant were ready to receive the touch from him. While the boys and the Mandali were gathered on the crypt platform, the following evening, Baba taunted Ali. So if Ali was there, Ali is there, he's not really, he's giving him this look and he's saying, nowadays Ali is only interested in his studies. He has forgotten about me and he only thinks about his father. So that was it. Ali couldn't take any more and he began to wail. uncontrollably, and his only impulse was to get up and run. Ali was his impulse, he was a runner. So a few of the Mandli, Rauseb was tall and fast, they would be deputed to chase him and catch him whenever he had the impulse to run. And this was a time like that. So Baba signaled Rauseb to catch him and bring him back. But this time nothing could pacify him, including the master's proximity. Ali continued sobbing for 3 hours, while the others could only watch there in stunned silence. Finally, Baba had Rauseb carry him into the crypt cabin. Baba held him in his arms, kissed him on the forehead, and laid his head on Ali's chest. For a few minutes, the boy closed his eyes and became calm and quiet then. After 15 minutes or so, Baba directed Rauseb to wake him up. But Ali could not move or open his eyes. After being repeatedly questioned for some time, he managed to respond in a faint whisper. "How are you, Ali?" "Happy." "What do you see?" "Baba." "Where?" "Everywhere." Padri and Rauseb were assigned shifts to take care of Ali again in the hospital for the next few days as Baba gradually brought him down. As he came out of his dazed state, he became restless again, which compelled him again to run. So the Mandli continued the careful watch over him around the ashram. Ali could not overcome his aversion to eating until Baba fed him with his own hands. Then he began to sleep at night and became a little more normal, but his restlessness grew more intense and he lost his high spiritual experience, so much so that Baba renewed it temporarily on February 9th by passing his fingers over Ali's forehead. Let's go to the next image, please. After the mass inner stirring of love had manifested in early January, Baba advised the Meherashram administrators to contact all the parents or guardians of the boys, asking them to sign a stamped bond of consent, allowing their boys to remain in the Meherashram for 5 years. He had mentioned to the Mandali then that about 20 of the boys were really ready for the spiritual path, and he acceded to the pleading of many of the boys that month, permitting them to forego their studies so that they could spend their days with him. But Baba ordered all the boys to resume their studies on February 1st, and to encourage the other boys and to please Baba, Ali also attended classes, though he still hadn't regained normal consciousness. Ali was like the archetypal boy. He was the key. He was the key. Not Abdullah Pakravan. Abdullah Pakravan was the icon. He was the example. This is what you could be. But Ali was the archetype. He was the key to this work. After receiving the request to keep their boys in the Meher Ashram for 5 years, some of the parents decided to withdraw their sons. And this is when Alaba was taken away with his cousin. The Hindus were afraid that Meher Baba was turning their boys into sannyasis, but the main complaint of the Muslims was that their boys had begun bowing their heads on Meher Baba's feet. It was inevitable that the outside world would misunderstand the events of the Meher Ashram, resulting in rumors and gossip. Some thought that the boys were crying because they were being coerced to convert to the Zoroastrian religion. Other people had heard that a few of the boys had gone mad. Some of the Mandali, it's true they did, but they didn't understand what the madness was. Not ordinary. Some of the Mandali often had to spend their many hours trying to reason with family members who had come to remove their boys from the ashram. One morning, Ramaji's father, Ramaji was one of the important, let's say, he was definitely a top 10 ashram boy from Arangan. So one morning, Ramaji's father came adamantly demanding that his son return home with him. But after he was taken back to Arangan, Ramaji refused to eat, drink, or speak to anyone. And by the evening, his father relented and allowed him to go back to the ashram. On February 17th, the elder brother of one of the Mughal Muslim boys named Muhammad came to remove him from the ashram. Though the Mandali had spent many hours trying to dissuade him, he was unmoved. And so around 8 o'clock in the evening, he was escorted up the hill. They were all gathered on the crypt platform as usual when the boy was informed that he would have to leave with his brother. At that, the boy Muhammad tried to run away, but he was quickly caught by Rauseb, who did his best to calm him, but to no avail. As he began to sob helplessly, the enraged elder brother grabbed the boy by the collar, shaking him and dragging him away. When Muhammad continued to resist, his brother began to slap him. Everyone watched, simply shocked, waiting for Baba's reaction. One of the men shouted, "Be human, handling that poor soul." And the brother just retorted, "Alive or dead, I'm taking him away from here." As the Tonga carrying the two brothers began to ride off, Muhammad cried out his departing message. "Tell Baba, I may be dragged away, but I will not forget him." Not a dry eye witnessed that event. The boys continued there, weeping there quietly, and Baba didn't send them to bed till around midnight. Ramju wrote, "The master did not retire for the rest throughout that night and continued weeping silently for a long time. The next day, Baba allowed his birthday to be celebrated. It went on as scheduled, since some of the lovers of his had come a long way to attend. This is a photograph of Baba in the opening of the original crypt cabin doorway here. The Baba remained in seclusion there at that position, while the Mandali gathered, women on one side, men on another side, to celebrate Baba's birthday.
Can we give 5 minutes?
5 minutes. We're almost over here. Okay? And we're to the end of it now? Okay. So it was one of the few, this was one of the only 2 occasions that the women were able to come up the hill.
Peter,
Yes.
you in 1929 now?
No, this is 1928. Still 1928. February 1928.
So the period when Mehra was not supposed to even see another man and all this was happening simultaneously?
This was happening, but when they came up the hill, the men didn't look at the women and the women didn't look at the men. That was the order. That's how they maintained it.
Suppose men are coming, women have to go inside, something like that.
No, they were kept there, but there was an understanding that the men don't look at the women don't look at the men. That was Baba's wish. That's all they needed to do. They had the discipline developed by that point. They didn't need to do more. A 5-minute break. Okay, so let me just get up. You want to break at this point right here?
Yeah, that's fine. Then we'll have
Okay, anyway, on this day then, both the men and the women, Manli had the opportunity to wash Baba's feet, but he was not in a joyous mood that day. A few days after Baba's birthday was celebrated, a telegram came from one of the men in Bombay. Ali's father wants him back. Baba reacted by saying, if Ali goes, everything goes. I will come out of seclusion and shut down the institution. Two of the Mandali offered to go to Bombay and try to reason with Ali's father. Baba agreed. They went, they wired back the next day, successful. But the day after that, another Mughal father arrived, and although they were impressed with the ashram and the explanations given, they removed 3 more boys. Early the following morning, the business partner of Ali's father arrived with the intention of taking Ali back to Bombay. But this man proved to be an honest gentleman. He frankly stated that he had heard unpleasant rumors about the ashram, but listened patiently as the Mandali disarmed each complaint with rational explanation. And after being given a tour of the whole institution so that he could personally verify the conditions, he not only left Ali undisturbed, he decided to enroll the 2 boys that he had brought with him. On the morning of February 25th, Ali's father arrived, and unfortunately he had left Bombay before his partner had the opportunity to relay his rational good opinion of the ashram. After he was given a tour of the ashram school, Ali's father was persuaded to take some hours rest after the night journey. And after being served lunch, discussions began. Over the course of 4 hours, Rao Sahib was able to gradually convince him that keeping his son in Meher Ashram would be to the greatest benefit. But just when Rao Sahib stepped out of the room to get the draft of the new agreement to be signed, another Mughal arrived full of his own preconceived notions. On his way to the office, Rao Sahib passed Ali and felt prompted to ask him what he had in his pocket. Ali showed him a penknife and said that if his father took him away from Baba, he would cut his own throat. Ali was quickly escorted to Baba, who scolded him. Never, ever even think of violence against anyone, including your own self. And Baba promised him, if you are taken away, I will either come out of seclusion or break up the institution. By the time Rao Sahib had returned, the second Mughal had persuaded Ali's father to remove his son from the ashram. So now the whole process of trying to reasonably convince both the men had to begin afresh. After a few more hours of intense discussion, Rao Sahib realized that it was hopeless to pursue the case any further. The boys would be removed. Ali checked his emotions and silently obeyed his father's order to sit in the tonga, but he was not planning to go away and live happily ever after. At the crypt cabin that evening, for the first time, Baba asked the Mandali how long he had been fasting in seclusion. The count was 67 days in seclusion, 107 days fasting, the last 33 days on weak tea without milk. Baba told them, I've become very weak. I will come out then and begin eating. Ali would not lose anything, but the purpose of the work has not been served here. I will have to do it all over again. Then Baba ordered, no one should touch me for the next 10 days under any circumstances unless I order otherwise. When Baba met with the Mandali the next morning, it was decided that the two of them should go to Bombay and again lobby for the return of Ali to the ashram. Then, for no apparent practical reason, he ordered some of the men to begin demolishing a few of the temporary ashram structures on the hill Yet at the same time, he directed another group of the men to repair and build some new structures on the other side. Let's go to the next image, please. Early that evening at 5:45, Baba came out of seclusion and was taken to Lower Meherabad in the rickshaw. The boys and men had decorated it with whatever leaves and flowers and buntings they could find. And just as they passed the dooney on the way to the women's compound, a large flame burst out of it into the air for a second or two. This had never happened before, and it was odd because the dooney was in its usual condition of hardly smoldering. The women were overjoyed to see Baba in their little world again, and after 2 months of seclusion. It was the beginning of the monsoon season also. For the next several weeks at Toka, Baba had this habit of only wearing his shorts there at Toka while they established the ashram. Besides the 100+ ashram boys, there were about 400 other residents of the colony, which Baba named Meherabad. He again underwent extended periods of fasting and seclusion with a focused attention on the Prem ashram. Ramanali remembered Baba's comment when Ali was taken away the previous February. I will have to do the whole thing over again. This is where he was doing that. But at the Toka ashram, spiritual surge manifested more internally in the boys. An increasing number of them preferred meditation, sleeping only a few hours a night. Next image, please. This is Baba's cabin at Toka. This is one of Nasha's pictures. I believe the bricks for this cabin came from the bathroom building where the women stayed. It was after 1928, it disappears from the history. And after looking at this problem a long time, I'm quite sure that this is where those bricks ended up. That cabin is still there. However, that nice doorway is not anymore. Now there is an iron grate over that. But you see this interesting six-sided dome with the flat top on this cabin. It looks very similar to a building that comes in the future. Mary and a few of the women sequestered with her continued their duty of cooking for the ashram. One day when Baba came to visit them, some of the boys followed him there. The women complained that they hardly got to see him, and still they had to share his company with the boys. So Baba proposed a novel way of settling the issue. Standing between the women and the boys, he had each group grab him by the wrists for a tug-of-war. After fasting for 5.5 months, my body is broke for tug-of-war. And he told him, don't think about my body, you just pull as hard as you can, each of you. We'll see. Let's see who is stronger and who loves me more. The women won. And for at least that day, Baba spent more time with them. Toka was a change from the dry heat of Meherabad, and Baba encouraged the boys and many of the men to enjoy swimming in the river there. It was quite a different experience for them. But it rained a lot there during the monsoon season. It would have been nice to come there in March, but anyway, they ended up coming there at the beginning of the monsoon season. Chanji once made a comment. With Baba, we always seem to be at the wrong place at the wrong time for the weather. Either too hot, too wet, or something. Chota Baba was not really a Premashram boy. He was already finished. There was nothing for him. He was the icon. He wasn't kept with the boys. He had his own place, separate. apart, doing his own thing. He was the icon.
He looks much older as well.
Pardon?
He looks much older as well.
He's 17 years old at this point. Some of the other boys were that old, but he was one of the older boys. There was another boy, as I said, Rajaram, who in February of 28 was shifted to stay with the Mandali. So he also wasn't really one of the Premashram boys per se, because he also graduated. Once Baba elevated them as far as he wanted to, these two boys at least, they were finished. They were established, and to work as being archetypes didn't really so much apply to them as being examples. Whereas the other boys, specifically Ali, was the key. He had to be there. So once again, succumbing to malicious gossip, Ali's father and guardians of 3 of the other Muslim boys came and removed them from the ashram in August. At this time, the work for the rest of the ashram went on despite Ali's absence, and Baba made no apparent efforts to bring the boys back. Within a few days, he even lifted restrictions on the ashram boys' access to his presence for a few weeks. They took full advantage of the opportunity, crowding around and holding on to him wherever he went. Baba acceded to their request for photographs of him in different costumes. And because of that, we have some of the best images of him of those early days. That we have more photographs taken at Toka than we have of Meherabad, at least that we know, that we have found. Let's go to the next image. So here's an example. Baba dressed in Western clothes, and you can see the boys peering out, and one holding the background, and one looking here. Let's go to the next image. And here's another one that is well known. Baba dressed in this way.
And that was his side.
Dhoti maybe. A dhoti. Baba's wearing a dhoti. And a shawl.
Looks like it has a
And
border
that.
right there.
And that peacock. On October 3rd, Baba decided to go to Nasik by way of Ahmednagar with a few of the men for a change. As they were driving out of Nagar, another car passed slowly from the other direction carrying a special passenger, Hazrat Babaji. 2 days later, they returned to Ahmednagar and had planned to stay overnight, visiting the house of the Satta family. But that day, Baba wanted to sit quietly alone in the garden in the front facing the road there. Within a minute, a car pulled up not far from where he was sitting. The passenger again was Babaji. After a few moments of silent communion, she left, and Baba came into the house and remarked, "Since Babajan has come again, I'm free. So we'll go back to Toka now." Upon returning to the ashram, they found Ali awaiting them, all with the others. Once again, he had successfully escaped and returned to Baba. Ali has written about all of his escape adventures, or at least he hasn't written, but the narration of his adventures is recorded in sobs and throbs for the most part. From the next day, Baba began spending his time with the Premashram boys, allowing the other residents to greet him only during a half-hour period in the evenings. Rustam was given the authority over the affairs of the colony and told not to bother Baba with any details. On October 23rd, Baba came out of seclusion there and broke a fast of 43 days. He had begun passing blood in his urine, and his health was weak. When asked why he put himself through this, he answered, "When I observe a fast, it is tantamount to all the people in the world fasting." sensing it's no one but I in everyone. By that time, the number of boys in the Prem ashram had grown to 33. However, some of the boys had developed a lax attitude, and Baba decided to transfer 15 of them back to the Meher ashram. Most of these boys began to weep when they were informed that they were expelled from the Prem ashram. An 8-year-old boy named Pandit, who was probably the youngest boy in the Prem ashram, sobbed and pleaded with Baba, "Please give me one more chance, Baba. You are God and I'm just a little boy." So Baba included him, and of the other boys who were beside themselves with remorse, he eventually allowed only 2 more back in, pacifying the rest with some gifts of his photographs, buttons, and personal items. Next image, please. Many of the residents suffered from colds and fever as the winter weather came on in November, and Baba began to complain about the Toka climate. On November 18th, he announced that the whole colony would be moved back to Meherabad. And he persuaded the Meher ashram boys to go home until things were reestablished back at Meherabad. But he wanted to keep the Prem ashram, he wanted to keep the Prem ashram boys. He persuaded the Meher ashram boys, did I say that? He persuaded the Meher ashram boys to go home until things were reestablished back at Meherabad, but he wanted the Prem ashram boys with him. And he commented, "They are my jewels. I will set them on the path." The period of intense work for the Prem ashram and the reason for the sudden change of the plan became clear the next day. Ali's father appeared again to demand the return of his son, this time with a notorious gangster. But Baba had already sent many of the boys back home by the time Ali was taken away. Starting November 26, 1928, the Toka ashram was dismantled over the course of a week, and all the materials and supplies were gradually shipped back to Meherabad. For another week or so after that, the ashram was rebuilt on the hill. I'm going to point out some of the people here in this photograph. It was taken in October at Toka. This is Kakashane here on the right. Standing above him is another one of the early Western. This was an Estonian man who was a real seeker who had been wandering around India. He became absolutely devoted to Baba after seeing him immediately and experiencing the ashram at Toka. His name was Sadhu Lake, Christian Lake. On the other side is a man named Meherabad Star, who you remember, who was associated with Baba for a few years. He was frankly despised by most of the Mandali because of his behavior during the 6 months where he was at Toka, along with his wife and sister-in-law. Baba is here, and a number of the other boys are there. Espandio Vasali, you asked about, is right here. Some of the other Mandali are in there. This is Pendu. Nadashir Dastur, who is one of the combined diary authors, is here. Rustam. Homi Bhatana. I can't quite see this, I'm going to have to get a little closer. Baba's brother Bharam. Ramju. Anyway, if we had more time, we'd look more closely at some of these, but I can't quite see these people anyway. Dake Palkar is here. Peter. Oliver's gone. He was taken away the previous February.
Peter did.
She is the sister-in-law of Meherabad Star.
Did people follow up with the boys as, as their lives developed after the film and so forth?
Yes,
they're still?
Many of them.
Okay.
Baba's particular work for them, he mentioned, would be important in the centuries following.
Okay.
The specific work for the Prem Ashram was to be as spiritual caretakers for the world after the advent of the avatar, in that space between the avataric advents coming. That was, as he said, as he mentioned, when he realized the circle, he would also realize Chota Baba, for example, he said, specifically to do his work in Arabia. Now, returning to Meherabad on December 9th, Baba stayed in the small room south of the tank room, that room that is now a library there. Then he began to spend the nights in the script cabin again. He stayed in the tank room, the south room of the tank, for 4 days, and then went back to the script cabin. On December 13th, Ali's father arrived again looking for his son. He was exasperated from the months of chasing after the boy and was finally ready to listen to the common sense advice of the Mandali. Asking them to readmit Ali, he gave a fresh promise not to disturb them again. But that didn't last. All right, now we'll go to the next section, number 3.
Oh, next section, number 3.
A few other boys had also escaped from their guardians and endured difficult tramps back to Baba.
This is number 3 already. We are. So
This is number 3?
Yeah.
Oh, then we need 4, sorry. That's it. This photograph was taken around that time. Beautiful. A few other boys had also escaped from their guardians and endured difficult tramps back to Baba. On the evening of December 28th, while he and the Mandali were sitting on the crypt platform, a haggard young boy quietly approached and placed a wreath of wild fresh roses on Baba's head that he had picked in a field as he was approaching Meherabad. It was Ahmed, one of the boys who had been taken away with Ali on the 19th of August. He had slipped away from Bombay 6 days before, walking and begging his way all the way back to Meherabad to his master. After the return to Meherabad, an overall assessment of logistics was made. Baba and the close Mandali spent much of the first day of 1929 meeting and discussing the situation. The running expense for such a large group was untenable. They were already in debt. Boaseb was given the responsibility of discerning those who were necessary, willing to work, and wishing to stay of the Mandali. Baba, remembering the year previous, 1 year, when on the hill the boys were mad in love with him, made this comment at the meeting. Last year on this day, the boys were crying, but this year we're crying. That evening, though, he told Boaseb, don't worry, all will be well. Chelsea, Chelsea. It means it'll go. The very next day, the number of boys of the Meher Ashram began to express their wishes to go, and by that evening, 9 were sent home. The population of Meherabad was gradually being whittled down. On January 12th, Baba announced that he would be leaving soon with just a few on a walking tour. So the ashram would be temporarily closed.
The mystery of this timing was clear before sunrise the next morning, when Ali's father showed up yet once again to take Ali away. By the end of that day, most of the rest were sent home. Rao Sahib would escort most of the Persian boys back to Iran. Having to leave Baba, many of them fell at his feet weeping. And this was the day that in the East Room, Rao Sahib, on behalf of the boys, wrote that beautiful message that we discovered renovating the East Room just a few years ago. With 2 boys and 16 men, Baba left Meherabad 2 days later. But after a few days into the tour, Baba severely twisted his ankle. Since he would not stop walking, his ankle didn't heal. And he decided to cut the walking tour short. And they returned to Meherabad on the 27th. In the meantime, Ali had managed to escape from home yet once again, returning to Meherabad on the 17th. Melandali informed Ali's father of his whereabouts, but this time Haji Muhammad finally had a change of heart and allowed his son Ali to stay. Along with Ali, 17 other boys were recalled to form the new Prem Ashram. Baba began spending the nights in his jopti again from February 6th. His parents came for a few days during the middle of the month to attend his birthday celebration. Baba's 35th birthday was celebrated in Meherabad on Sunday, 17th, 1929, with the usual festivities of those years. Before he retired at 3 a.m., several thousand people had taken his darshan. From February 21st, Baba stopped allowing new people to come for his darshan and interviews. The next day, the school vacation was over, and he began to work for the Prem Ashram again. He insisted on bathing the boys, washing their clothes, and sweeping their quarters himself. One of the boys, Genu Chamar, had fallen ill with pneumonia. Baba nursed him often and arranged for the best care. He placed the boy in his own crib cabin. Genu's family was informed, and his father came to take the boy away on the morning of the 24th. Though Baba tried to dissuade him, Genu's father was insistent. So Baba had one of the men arrange for a taxi and ordered to place Genu in the taxi when it comes, and no one should do anything more regarding him. But in the meantime, through the Mandli Sidhu and somebody else involved, urged Genu's father to leave the boy at Meherabad, assuring him that he could get no better care than with Baba. Genu's relatives agreed, and finally his father consented. The 2 men happily went to inform Baba, but instead of being pleased, Baba was very upset. Saying, "Why the hell did you break my order?"
We need to end at 4:30, and we have 10 minutes more.
Okay.
You can open it up for questions and answers for 10 minutes.
I want to finish the story.
Sure.
Okay? Sure. We'll go to the next. Not yet, though.
Sorry.
So Sidhu and the other man went to Baba to inform him that they had successfully changed the man's decision. And Baba was irate, saying, "Why the hell did you not follow my orders? I told you put Genu in the taxi and that's it. Do nothing more." So while Baba was scolding them, Genu's father also appeared. And he begged Baba's forgiveness and pleaded to allow Genu to stay. Baba's response was, that time has passed now. But if you want him to be here, you are welcome to keep him here at your own risk. But I can no longer be responsible for Genu. I have now severed my connection with him. Genu's father accepted the responsibility, and Baba agreed to keep him, allow the boy to stay. But Baba did not see, had been keeping Genu in his own crypt cabin. Baba didn't see Genu even once of the rest of that day. And though he was given the best medical treatment by Padre and the other Mandali, he died at midnight there, Baba's birthday. With his dying breath, Genu had called out Baba's name. Genu's father and the men felt great remorse for not acting carefully in heeding Baba's words. Baba remarked that though the three men had lost, Genu had won. He was merged into God. Baba said, I've given him liberation. He is freed from rebirth. Let's go to the next image. Baba reminded the Mandali that sometimes he had to make adjustments due to inevitable events. In order to wipe out the mixed effects of Genu's death, he decided to take the boys and few of the Mandali to Happy Valley for a few days. And it's not clear exactly where Genu died at Meherabad. But while Baba and the boys were gone, some of the Mandali began the work of dismantling the crypt cabin. That was the wooden structure. And it would be replaced with these walls of soft rock, which mostly came from the well excavation at Lower Meherabad the previous years. So the crypt cabin became the crypt room. That work was done in about 10 days in early March, mostly, by that point. And the inauguration happened on March 9th that year. And these photographs were taken about that time. These are most of the boys remaining in the Prem Ashram. Chota Baba, of course, is not in this picture. This boy is Vasant, who's also one of the very important, highly advanced boys. He had had a very high fever of about 105 during this time. That's why he's wearing this thing over his head, and Baba has his eye on him. There are none of the Irani boys left here, except Majnun, and, where is he? Right here, Kalingar. These two Irani boys were not sent back to Iran because their nature was more like the Mandalis. What was that? They didn't care to meditate. They only wanted to work. Ali Akbar was very fond of digging holes. So the Mandali said, these are our kind of people, Baba. So they said, okay. The Mandali liked them, especially Kalinga, very much. He would live with the Mandali for 10 years. During the next 2 months, Baba seemed to be winding down the ashram. Let's go to the one last image. This photograph is also, we know this photograph, this was also taken. Now this year also I saw one third photograph in this series that I hadn't seen before, similar to this.
That's the one with Baba.
That one is the second, and then there's a third one I've seen that I'd never seen before. Finally it came out of Meherabad.
But relaxing on the...
Yes, again, a different position. During the next 2 months, Baba seemed to be winding down many of the activities at Meherabad. It was evident that his work with the schoolboys and most of these, it was evident that his work with the schools and most of these boys was nearing completion. From May 2nd, the boys were taught the technical skills of typesetting and printing to give them practical opportunity in life. After a week, Baba asked the local boys to return to their family homes and to find work or to pass the time singing bhajans. With a few of the boys and some of the Mandli traveled far to the north for a few weeks, and by June, with only 4 of the boys remaining, a new Prem ashram was established on the hill. Since the Prem ashram had started winding down, Baba had shown an apparent indifference to the boys. Led by Ali, their reaction was insolence, sometimes purposely disobeying Baba's directives, testing the length of the rope. This caused great frustration to the Mandali who were responsible, but Baba was unconcerned. However, he alleviated the situation with a simple act on June 12th. Though he hadn't been on one for a few years, on that day he surprised the boys by riding a bicycle around the ashram on the hill. That simple act, they were delighted at seeing it, and they began from there on after to correct the behavior. All the temporary structures on the hill were taken down after June 17th. From the 21st, Baba began teaching the 4 Prem ashram boys from 8 a.m. to 11, and his personal attention lightened their spirits. However, on July 9th, the boys' ashram was closed. And again, with a few of the boys and some of the Mandli, Baba traveled far north. Next image, please. This is our last image. Far north to Kashmir for seclusion on Hagwan Hill. Baba did not return to Meherabad till the end of August. I wanted to show you this image because this photograph was taken in August and the return from that trip. This is during the last period when Baba wore the Kamli coat. And look at the condition it's in. All torn and patched. That is all due to the effects of the Prem ashram boys' assault on Baba's clothes and his body. That's why you see it as it was. I wanted to show you clearly that image from 1927 and this one 2 years later. Now we've run out of time. We've finished through the Prem ashram period. Anybody have questions?
What happened to most of the boys as of like the 2000?
Many different stories. Most of them went back to their homes. Some of them continued leading a life of spiritual aspirant.
Only Aloba has been the part of Mandali.
Well, there was another ashram boy. Alaba was not a Prem ashram boy, he was a Meher ashram boy. He became part of the Mandali. There were other Meher ashram boys who were very close to Baba through the years. Murli Kali was on the New Life. He stayed with Baba from this time through the New Life. So he also spent years living as one of the Mandali. He was one of the boys. There were other ones, even Baba's relatives. Baba insisted that his own brother, Adi Jr., join the ashram. He didn't want to. He wanted to be with his friends in Pune. Baba gave him a slap and said, "You're in the ashram." That was from July. There were others. There are many others. We won't get into it. Any other questions? Yes,
Do you think
Mark?
all this attention to Iran, Persia, Iran, by Baba in all this time is going to have an effect on the situation and relationship of that nation?
It has to, quickly. To give you an explanation, you know Baba made those trips to Iran. First in 24, and then in 29, and then in 31. In 29 and 31, and specifically 29, he contacted very many people, including some very advanced souls there during that time and others. He also did seclusion then later in the mosque of the The 8th Imam or the 12th Imam?
Imam maybe.
Which number, I don't remember. One of the 8th or 12th, I don't remember. The mosque of the 8th Imam, or whatever it was, in Mashhad,
What period was that of time?
1931. And the caretaker of the mosque was not allowed to let anybody in there, but he had a dream, and the Imam appeared to him and told him, this man is coming. He looks like this. He'll be silent. You do whatever he needs. So he was ready. And Baba would stay overnight in this mosque to do seclusion. 12 years later, Baba gave out a circular which had so many points. The first point was, the tree of my divine manifestation has been planted in Mashhad, Iran, from where it will grow and spread, eventually to cover the whole world.
Wow.
Of course, the last point in that circular was, I will definitely break my silence within 1 year. You know how it is, Don. He always had to throw a curve at me.
I want to thank Peter Nordeen for this wonderful two-day presentation. I think he has tremendous insights and he's done a tremendous amount of work and given us the opportunity of explaining in great detail, particularly the days of the boys who were in Hazrat Babajan school and the Meher Ashram and then the Prem Ashram. When I traveled to Iran in 1976 in search of Meher Baba's antiquity, I had the opportunity of meeting 3 or 4 Prem Ashram boys. I was a guest of Asfandyar Vesali in Tehran, and I'll just mention one particular Prem Ashram boy whom we were searching because we were unable to find or locate Baidul's house in Jafarabad. So we were wandering around in this little village looking for this man, and somebody told us that, why don't you tap that man's shoulder, he might be the man. And we tapped his shoulder and all we said was, Jai Baba. And he suddenly turns around and says, he embraces us. He was the boy we were looking for. And he spoke English, not fluent English, but broken English. And he said, this English I learned at Meher Baba's school. And then he took us to Jafarabad and to various different places associated with Baba's visit in 1929. So this has been a wonderful, wonderful journey with Peter Nordeen. And we are planning to come out with a 4-part DVD, and hopefully we'll be able to share that with you in a short time. Once again, thank you very much for coming, and we are hoping that Beloved Archives will be able to hold more such outreach programs in the coming days, and that all of you will take the opportunity of coming to these events. And on behalf of the board of Beloved Archives, I once again thank you very much.